Hey guys, it's Thegrumpymanlikestopaint here. So today I'm going to be showing you how to paint an Ork boy from Games Workshop. This is a 2008 version of the Ork boys. So it's a little bit dated, but I like this sculpt, and it was about when I was getting more and more into the hobby when I was younger, and it was a little bit more affordable to me, and when I had a lot less grey hair. So this video is designed to try and give you guys an easy and accessible way of painting an orc. I'll be showing you what paint I'm using, what type of technique I'm using. I'm going to try and keep it just very basic, so you've got a nice looking model, something you can paint super quick and get on the table as quick as possible, because we all want to play the game with some fantastic painted models. So with that said, let's get into the video, and I will do my very best to narrate over what it is I am doing while I'm painting. Okay, so I'm using dried bark and I'm using the overbrush technique. So I'm taking a lot of the paint off the brush, I'm dabbing it all over, getting a nice even brown coat. I'm not too fussed about getting it all into the darkest areas because they'll add to the shadow effect later on of the model. So for the next part to paint the skin, I'm using Ork flesh. I'm using a loose approach. So what I'm doing is I'm not focusing too much on getting a super even coat, because realistically an Orc skin isn't smooth and shiny. He's going to be quite dirty, he's going to be quite mucky, quite grimy. So I've got nice and down paint and I'm just splodging it on the skin to create a nice rough and ready, potentially grim dark effect with the skin. So when you're doing this, don't feel like it has to be super neat. Don't worry about getting it onto other areas. You know, you can tidy that up a little bit later on. Okay, so for this part, we're using a wash, and what is painting a mini if you're not using a wash over the colours that you've got as a quick and easy hack? I'm using Beeltan Green because it's a lovely, deep, rich green colour and it goes well over the base layer of Ork flesh. You don't have to be super neat with this, literally just dab it on your brush, slap it on the model, and then if you've got any excess wash left over, take it off your brush and then soak it back up again. I'm being nice and loose, getting it on the model, nice thick application, get it to sink into those muscular recesses. Okay, so this is the highlight stage of the skin and I'm using Ogre and Camo. I'm using a dry brush technique to highlight all of the edges, and what I'm doing is I'm brushing the model downwards. So imagine the light is directly above the orc. I'm using the brush and only going downwards. I'm not picking up the bits which are underneath, so I'm not going upwards. I'm trying to just particularly pick up the highest edges. Okay, so for this section, I'm using Corvus Black by Citadel Colours Games Workshop. I didn't want to go with something that was totally black because I wanted it to look like an off black, as though it's been worn for a while. And Corvus Black has got that nice grey black tone to it. I'm picking out all of the metal areas, parts of his robes and his like cloth areas on his clothes, so it creates a nice base. Don't worry about getting this on any other areas. Realistically, the model's going to be further than arm distance away from you, so on a tabletop you're not going to be able to see it, so don't worry. Okay, so we've got a nice base coat of dryad bark to work on. We're going to use a Steel Legion drab. We're going to have a nice loose approach, so the paint's nice and thin, and we're just liberally applying it to the model. Don't worry about if it looks smooth and it's got a nice finish. If you're missing little bits, little crevices, whatnot, don't worry, it just adds to the character of the model. so now we're going to be using an Agrax Earth shade over that Steel Legion drab. Just apply it liberally, let it sink into the recesses, don't worry about getting on the Corvus black, it'll just add to the character of the model. Okay, so we've let the Agrax Earth shade dry. Oh my god, I can't even say that. We're going to be applying the Baneblade Brown now as a loose highlight. Now we've got to remember that leather looks worn and tired and stressed, and having this loose approach to painting a highlight on these brown parts is just going to add more to the character and the depth of what it is we're doing. Don't worry about getting into all the recesses, you're literally just picking out areas that look as though the light's hitting it. We're also going to be using this and we're going to apply it neatly to the bone part of the gun and the teeth on the model. Okay, so we've done all the little brown bits, now we're going to start working on the black areas, which we did as a base coat with the Corvus black. So we're going to use two colours to pick up those highlights on the black areas of his strapper and his boot and his like little Tarzan loincloth thing. We're going to use Eshin Grey as the first highlight and then the Dawnstone as a super highlight. Got to remember that when you're applying paint to cloth textured robes and things like that, you want it to look as though it's like scraggly and things like that. So don't worry, with the loose approach you'll get a nice finish with what it is you're doing. You know, just pick up those higher points and just dibble dabble the brush onto the model and it'll look great. Okay, so for this part, we're going to be using lead belcher. Again, we're just using a nice loose approach to putting the paint on the model. Don't worry about it being completely covered, because if there's little bits of black showing through the metal areas, then again, that just creates that characterful effect of what it is you're trying to do. My God, I cannot speak today. So now we've painted the lead belcher, we're going to create a little bit of interest in the black areas of the model. So leather doesn't necessarily look black and grey. Sometimes you get like a bit of purple, you get a bit of blue, and you get a bit of green into it. So what I like to use is a coalia green shade, and basically just wash that over the black areas of the model, and it just adds some interest. Plus it contrasts nicely with the green of the skin too. Now we've done the coalia green shade, it's bringing up the colour of the leatherwork, but you may have got some into any recesses or whatever. It might look a little bit odd. Don't worry, from a distance you can't see that, but we're going to be dropping some Nuln Oil all over the metalworks of the model, and if you want to, you can drop it into the deeper, darker recesses of any areas of the model you think you want it to be looking dark and black. Okay, so for this part of the video, we're going to be using three colours: Pallid Witch Flesh, Ironed Yellow, and Agrax Earthshade. We're going to be using the Agrax Earthshade first, and we're going to be applying this all over the model. So in between the teeth, we're going to be applying it into the leather, browny, strappy areas, which we had put the Baneblade Brown down as a highlight. So we're just going to sink that into the darker areas just to create a little bit more depth to those brown parts. We're going to be applying it to the metal parts of the model because you want to create that rusty, grimy, dirty effect, and Agrax Earthshade is really good for that. So we've got that Agrax shade down, nice and dry, and we want to create weird like little rusty parts of the model. I used ironed and yellow, and I regret using this because for me it's not orange enough and it's not deep and rich enough. It does create a nice effect, it pops from a distance, but you can use other colours such as Gryph-hound orange or just any real like orange that you can find as a paint. Just water it down and drop it into the recesses so it looks like the rust in those parts is forming. Okay, so I'm using the pallid witch flesh now, and I want to apply this loosely but neatly over the teeth areas. Try to avoid the recesses so you don't need to go back over with an Agrax shade again. And then what I'll do then is apply this into the eye sockets. I'm not using a pure white just because it's too bright and I want there to be a little bit more depth when I apply the next layer for the colour for his eyes. So this is quite a fun part to do. I'm using Doomfire Magenta as a contrast paint straight out of the pot, and I'm applying this straight into the eye sockets. Don't worry about getting this on any of the green bits, which are the surrounding areas. Get it on the white, on the pallid witch flesh part, but if it goes onto the green areas, it just creates that ambient glowy eye effect. Now, once that's dry, I'm going to be going back in with some pallid witch flesh, and I'm just dotting into that, so that's going to be the kind of the brightest point where that red is glowing from, and it'll just bring out the colour a little bit better. Okay, so for the final part, and which is probably the most satisfying part, finish painting the model. I'm going to be using some mini tufts from Rival Crafts. You literally just use a pair of tweezers, pick a piece off that you want, and just stick that on to your base. And that is done. Nice, easy approach.